Every day, I wake up knowing that the more people I try to save, the more enemies I will make.
When you can do the things that I can, but you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you.
Whatever life holds in store for me, I will never forget these words. With great power comes great responsibility. This is my gift, my curse. Who am I? I'm Spider-Man.
Welcome, Marvel fans, to episode 19 of Marvelcast, a Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast by fans for fans each week. We'll discuss the latest news regarding the MCU, followed by reviews and discussion of the latest release content in this ever-expanding multiverse. Our audience is a key component to our show, and we'll wrap up each week by answering your Marvel-related questions. I'm your host today with JG, and joined with me today is my other co-host, Steven. How are you today?
Well, I'm great. This is hard to believe. It's our last show of 2021. It's our 19th episode, and I think next week's going to even be more fun. But yeah, I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, it is, like we said, like 19 weeks, 19 episodes, and next week is obviously a big one for us, number 20, and the awards, Marvelcasties. It's going to be a treat, and I'm excited for that. It's our final week of Spider-Man. Can you believe it? This is week 5 of Spider-Man coverage.
I think this was a really fun month, and I'm really glad that we did rewatch the films for obvious reasons that we're going to talk about today. I feel like that was a big payoff where I feel like other people that didn't rewatch them might not have gotten the same enjoyment out of the film. I mean, they enjoyed it, but little Easter eggs, little references were definitely more valuable. And it was fun to really spend a whole month around Spider-Man. Like, he's such an awesome character and an awesome hero that you can't really do a month of for every upcoming character next year, but we can definitely do something similar, as we get ready for some of these other sequel films in the future. But I think definitely good call on this month of Spider-Man.
Yeah, it was really great just to celebrate this character and really look back. 2 of the films I hadn't even seen before. The other 3 I hadn't seen in like years, and just getting to revisit this and just really appreciate this character. It was a great month, and I think it's sparked some ideas for us for the future. And we teased it a little bit, but next week is our Marvel Casties, and I just want to say thank you. Thank you. We've had a huge response, so many different answers and choices. It is staggering. I'm overwhelmed, to be honest. Steven, what are your just initial thoughts so far, just with the response that we've gotten in what we've seen?
Yeah, you first shared it last week on our Facebook page for 1138 Productions, and then I know you and I both shared it out on different social media platforms. And I want to thank everyone that shared it and everyone that's voted. As of this recording, we're up to 46 votes. And again, we're a new podcast. We're starting off, but we do value each and every one of your voices. We want this podcast to be a place for you to share your thoughts as well. It should not just be me and JG. So I am very excited for next week, where we get to actually share our audience feedback. JG and I both wrote down privately, we haven't talked about them, our own votes, and we did not vote in the Google form. So we will be sharing next week your voices as well as JG's opinion, my opinion. And I think it's going to be a really great episode. And correct me if I'm wrong, JG, we're going to skip the news and review next week. We're just going to focus on each of these categories.
Yep, it's just the award show. All the glitz and glam. And so this Friday is the last day to vote. So if you haven't voted already, or you know some friends and family who should vote, get it to them by Friday. Friday is that last day, meaning on Saturday it will not be available, so that we could get prepped and make it all look really pretty and awesome for you guys. And I will just say too, just a tease, there are some categories that are really close, and there have been some back and forth, and some nominees have the lead and then it slips, and then it just, some are, maybe not so close. But a lot of these categories are really neck and neck. So if you are really passionate about some of these characters and these nominations, vote. Get your friends and family to vote, because if not, it could be just a vote or 2 difference with some of these nominations.
And I think it's going to be such a great way. I mean, even though we're into next year at this point, and at that point, what a great way to look back on the year. And I hope this is a new annual tradition for us, because, I mean, this is just so much fun to look back. We are getting so many properties. I think we had almost 10 different properties this year alone, and next year probably even more when we look at it. So I'm really excited to continue to dive into this with you and make it an annual tradition, because we can look back on the past, but also move into great things in the next couple months.
Definitely. It is going to be something really special and really exciting. And so we are going to hop right into the news. We have a few brief news things that we want to talk about this week before we get into the main topic, which is obviously our spoiler-filled review of Spider-Man No Way Home. Before we do that, let's talk some news. So the big first thing that I saw that really jumped out to me was is George Clooney involved with Moon Knight, which really, like I said, these big names are just coming out of nowhere. Cosmic Circus, which is a site that we have definitely referenced before, had this saying, Marco Torrezin is an assistant art director who has been working on the Marvel Studios production of Moon Knight since January of 2021. On his website, he's listed all the different projects he's worked on, including The New Pope, Catch-22, and most recently, Moon Knight. Perhaps the most interesting detail you might notice is the director listed on the project is George Clooney. Clooney and Oscar Isaac also have worked together in the past. Steven, what are your thoughts on this? Because I didn't even know that George Clooney has... I always have envisioned him as an actor. I really can't even really think of many things that he's in. I just don't follow him much. I know he's a big name actor. But as a director, what are your thoughts on this out of nowhere?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I know he's really done a lot behind the scenes. He's done a lot in front of the scenes. I think, just looking at, the two big names, of course, with Moon Knight attached to it are Oscar Isaac and Ethan Hawke, two really big actors. So I'm excited to see what Clooney could do either behind the camera or maybe even pop up and bring himself into the MCU. I haven't seen him in acting as much lately. I think he's doing a lot more humanitarian work, and he is doing some more producing and directing behind the scenes. But he's a very talented actor. I think back when he started off he was in ER, was one of his first big roles back in the early 90s. He did that for 5 seasons, and then he really got more into the film side of things. But I think he is a very talented actor. He's, considered just a really good person all around. So I'm excited if we get more of this. And again, maybe it's a chance for him to kind of redeem himself, because it is kind of viewed as one of his weakest performances was the script that he got for Batman and Robin back in 97 that kind of killed the Batman franchise for a while. So as far as I know, without looking it up, he really hasn't been involved with comic book films since Batman and Robin 97. And so this would be a chance for him to kind of redeem himself. You would be like, I think you're making a career mistake if you don't get involved with Marvel right now with how well they're doing, and on the TV side, on the movie side. So yeah, I really hope he does get a chance to jump either behind the camera or in front of the camera for sure. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I think it's interesting because I love hearing some of these big name actors and actresses getting involved, because it really does it benefits them, but also benefits Marvel, because it adds some more like weight. Like, not that Marvel needs anything added to them already. They've obviously proved everything. But like it reminds me of whenever we found out that Angelina Jolie was going to be playing Thena. Like it adds that extra something to it. And I'm curious, it's someone that I'm not super familiar with, but it seems like that it has some interesting potential. And if he has worked with Oscar Isaac, then I feel like that this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, bring it on. I hope we get more. Again, I'm assuming Moon Knight's going to be our next show, and hopefully in the next maybe month or two. I think Disney Plus did put out their January slate, and that could always be subject to change. And I didn't see anything Marvel related on there besides the behind the scenes of Hawkeye. But hopefully they could easily add this at the end of January, or hopefully early February is my hope.
Yeah, I could see it starting around maybe a week or so after Book of Boba. I don't think we're going to see anything while Book of Boba is going on.
Oh, that's true. So does Book of Boba run the rest of January?
Yeah, it's 7 episodes, so it'll be 7 weeks. So it'll go into February.
You're right. So then, yeah, that's what I would think. Probably maybe around Valentine's Day, middle of the February is when we'll see Marvel's next show. I would bet. Good call.
And so going into another interesting story. Now, this isn't really like a report, but it's just something to talk about, especially for both of us being huge Walking Dead fans. So Norman Reedus, to preface, we'll start with this. So there has been a lot of talks, for a while now that, that their Ghost Rider's coming to the MCU, and that, they're in talks to cast Ghost Rider. Well, all of a sudden, some of these reports have been now heating up again, that they're actively talking about it, and that they may even have a certain someone. They haven't said exactly who, though. But Norman Reedus, also Daryl in The Walking Dead, has been liking a lot of these tweets and even shared some fan art. Now, this could be nothing. It could be him, excited that he has it. it could also be kind of like similar to Rosario Dawson, where fans are casting and they want this actor to get this role, and right now in this day and age of Hollywood, fans' reaction and just a little bit of publicity. Even look at Simon Liu and look at what happened with that. So I think, what do you think? What's your take on this?
Yeah, I was actually just going to mention Rosario Dawson, who really started retweeting images of herself as Ahsoka Tano, and that led to her getting the role in Mandalorian. So I am very interested. I mean, like JG said, he and I are both Walking Dead fans, and for the past 10 or 11 years now, when you think of Norman Reedus, you think of Daryl Dixon on a motorcycle. When you think of Ghost Rider, you typically think of Ghost Rider and a motorcycle. I know even Norman Reedus has another show on AMC where it's literally him as Norman Reedus, nonfiction show, riding around, visiting with people all around the country. And so Norman Reedus and motorcycles are kind of go hand in hand. I definitely think it's an easy pick to see him playing this role. I think he is, beloved by so many people as an actor. Like, that's why people are still tuning in. I think to Walking Dead is partially because of him. And there's a rumor he's getting a spinoff at some point too. I think that, he's been in other things too, that again, films that people have latched onto. So I think this would make a good casting call. I've heard this rumor for, it feels like years, but it feels like it's getting a lot of traction now. And it could be because maybe, again, he's manifesting this role for himself, or it could be similar to how Vincent D'Onofrio was saying before Hawkeye, hey, make sure you watch this Hawkeye show, and kept tweeting probably more than he should have been. But yeah, I actually would definitely love to see this. I feel like, we got a version of Ghost Rider in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a couple years ago, but it was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was not allowed to use, is it Johnny Blaze is the main one, I believe. And it was a different version. So this would actually be really cool to see. And it's time to go a little bit darker. We're getting Blade, we're getting Black Knight. Let's keep with this kind of darker theme. And he'd be the perfect person, in my opinion. Would you be excited to see him?
Oh, heck yes. Norman Reedus is such an incredible actor. As a Walking Dead fan, actually, I have another friend who's really into it, and they recommended Boondock Saints, and that's another thing he's in. And I think their range is so good, and I think he could really add something to this. I'm not familiar with the character of Ghost Rider. I didn't watch Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. I know it, from what I've seen, it does play into some of these darker characters, though, that we are getting, and that there is some possible team-up opportunities. So I think it is setting up some things to come, and I think it does make a lot of sense. And for him, like he said, he has a motorcycle show. Like, come on, that'd be so great. But like, now that we're starting to get some of these like more Walking Dead actors, I'm like, can we get some more now, please? Like, oh my goodness, like there's so much potential there. We've seen a lot of like Star Wars crossover. Let's get some of them.
Well, JG, if we do have a couple of off weeks without shows or films in the first couple months of the year, we could definitely go back and revisit some of these again, now that everything seems to be canon, especially after Spider-Man. Let's go back and watch maybe the 2 Nicolas Cage movies. I've never seen those.
Oh yeah.
And so like that would give us a chance to see a version of Ghost Rider, because with Multiverse of Madness, I mean, anything's possible.
Yeah.
So I say it's fair game. Let's jump back into some of these other movies maybe that neither of us have seen. I've not seen the whole Blade trilogy yet.
No.
So Ghost Rider is one that I definitely want to see before the new whatever potential it takes in the MCU.
Definitely. And I'm just excited. I think it'd be really a great addition. One final news story is kind of going off of Hawkeye a little bit. So if you haven't caught up for some reason, haven't watched the finale, I hope you have. But for some reason, this is going to be kind of a little bit of a spoiler. So if you haven't, then just fast forward a little bit. But we're going to be talking about Laura Barton's future. And I personally think that her story isn't over based off of this little quote here from Rhys Thomas, who's the director of the finale. This was on Marvel's website themselves, and they say, we've seen her over these years as his wife, and there was obviously a desire to expand her backstory. And Thomas continues, we should know more about her. There's more to her than just staying at home with the kids. It was a fun little thing to tease out over the season, and again, a nice little payoff that hopefully promises more of a character planted at the end. That last sentence definitely, it's at least shows that there is potential for more story. It doesn't necessarily confirm it. I personally think it is. But what do you think, Steven? Where do you think we're going to go? Do you think her story is going to continue?
Yeah, you could take this one of two ways. You could look at it as maybe we do a prequel series, do you recast Laura and Clint as like 20-year-olds and how they met as in as Agents of Shield. That could be one way to do it, and how she retired when they started having a family. Or you kind of bring Laura out of retirement, and Linda Cardellini looks young enough and physically fit enough that she could put back on that Mockingbird suit and rejoin up with her husband. I mean, we went into Hawkeye really thinking he was either going to pass away or retire, but I mean, I still get the vibe that Hawkeye could return for a second season, and I could definitely see, what it would be interesting would be is if Clint stayed home with the kids and had a smaller role, and maybe it was our new Hawkeye, Kate, teaming up with Mockingbird, Agent 19. That's just an idea I have. I mean, I think you don't just leave it with that little clue of who she is or was, but you definitely use that to build upon, like we've seen with so many other characters so far in Phase 4, where you introduce them only to bring them back bigger and better, like Yelena. I mean, where else? What are your thoughts? Do we see a flashback? Do we see moving forward with Mockingbird? Where would you like to see this character go?
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be we're going to have to see back to some degree, just because we haven't seen it. We now have an item from it, so we got to kind of figure out what's going on in the past. I do think her story is going to progress forward, though, and I personally, and I know I said this last week, I think she's showing up in Secret Invasion. I think it makes so much sense. I think that cast is so strong already. You just add her to the mix already, into the scale. Obviously, it's not going to be to the scope that was seen in the comics, but adding another character like her, like that is already, we now know has backstory and connection. Like, obviously she has a connection with Fury, and this is going to be so heavily centered around Fury. Like, I think, as much as this is going to tie in and connect to the Marvels and all that, I think just as much we're going to see a lot of Shield stuff as well. Even if Shield is not, predominantly active and all that, I think a lot of people associated with Shield are going to be very present in this show.
Yeah, I mean, they could not reboot, or they could bring back like an Agents of Shield type show, but like make it more of Agents of Shield in the MCU, where the ABC show always was kind of felt a little bit disconnected. Mm-hmm. And this would be a great way like to bring Shield back, because correct me if I'm wrong, is Shield currently, what's the situation in the MCU film?
I don't think it exists right now. Isn't it disbanded as far as we know?
Been disbanded since Winter Soldier?
Winter Soldier.
That's been a while. Yeah, I mean, I continued watching Agents of Shield till the end, but from especially this like Agent 13 and the Darkhold, like there have been so many instances where it's pretty much in its own pocket universe right now, and Agent Coulson is still dead in the film side of the MCU. So yeah, I mean, I'd be down for some type of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show to see these characters again, and I hope you're right. I would love to see her in Secret Invasion.
Lots of excitement, lots of potential, so many things to look forward to. We are going to be so spoiled, and I'm so excited that even some of these characters that we thought were kind of like minor and just supporting, they might have just as importance as some of these other like A-list characters. And so I'm excited that she's getting that story, and that there's potentially some possibilities for her to go. And so that does wrap up our news for the week, keeping it light and simple, as our main topic is going to be big and heavy. We're going to be hopping into it, which is going to be our review for No Way Home Spider-Man. This is going to be spoiler-filled. We're going to talk all about it, more than likely. If you're listening to this, you've already watched it. You've probably watched it twice or three times. But if for some reason you haven't, I hope you have a good rest of your week. Listen to this at some point, though. We're going to have a great discussion. I know it. Steven, let's do this. We waited, we speculated, we dedicated a whole month. Just go for it. Like, what are we're obviously going to go through the plot of this movie, but just your initial thoughts overall. You could talk about anything about this film.
Yeah, I mean, it was the best theater experience. I said this last week, just because now I can freely talk about it. Seeing characters and moments and references and jokes and lines that called back 20 years worth. I mean, Andrew and Toby walking through that portal. I mean, I feel like anytime you get a portal scene with Doctor Strange magic, you are going to have fans cheering from their seats. Like, I'm just so excited for what Multiverse of Madness is going to have us cheering for. But man, it felt so good. Like, I was just pure joy, happiness, smiling ear to ear throughout the entire movie, except for the part in the middle that we'll talk about. But man, you felt everything, all these emotions. It felt like it was a perfect capstone to not only Tom Holland's trilogy, but to 20 years of Spider-Man. It felt like a sequel to Spider-Man 3. It felt like a sequel to Amazing Spider-Man 2. It made those movies just as important, not just because of the villains, but because it continued the character arcs of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. Man, I'm so excited to talk about this with you. JG, it's been about 2 weeks. What are your thoughts still about this movie?
I just remember leaving the theater just so emotionally drained because that movie, it has some really high highs and some really low lows. And not that the lows are bad, it's a dark movie. It is a heavy movie. It hits you. And I love that it really does do justice like this 20 years of Spider-Man, and it concludes things from the original Spider-Man and then from the Amazing Spider-Man, and it doesn't feel forced. It feels so natural. It feels so like it was awarded, and that it felt right, and that it wasn't like, oh, let's just do this to make a quick buck. Like, yeah, they made a good buck. Like, we're already now domestically past 500 million, which is insane, but
I heard today it's made the most money for any Sony movie.
Yep.
Like, it beat Far From Home's. No, yeah, it beat Far From Home's entire run already, and it's only been 2 weeks.
This movie is special, and this movie, I really hope. I don't know, because it's very hard when it comes to Oscars. But I really hope that somehow it gets a Dark Horse nomination. I don't expect it to win, but at the very least, I hope it gets the nomination that I do think it deserves. Not just because of what it's done for the box office, but because I genuinely do think that this is a deserving movie with a great story from start to finish, that really does fan service in the right way without being cheap.
Absolutely. I feel like, it's like it was a 2.5 hours jam packed, but you never felt like it was throwing too much at you. And it gave you time to breathe, but also it knew it had a lot of story to tell. And that's what you pay for. You want to go in with a full story. You don't want to have a lot of downtime. Let's break it down. I mean, there are 3 pretty clear arcs. If we start at the beginning of the movie with everyone finding out, I mean, literally picking up where Far From Home left off. And let's go all the way up for this first act, I would say, until after the spell, but before he meets Doc Ock on the bridge.
Yeah.
So talk to me. This first arc, JG, is really about 3 kids, their senior year of high school, how different it is now in the world because of this big reveal. And also this idea that these kids just want to get to college. I mean, it's still a very high school-y, Ferris Bueller's Day Off type of movie where they have high school needs. They don't think about the world, big problems. What were your thoughts at the beginning of the movie? Like, even though it's building up to something bigger.
I love that it takes place immediately after the second one. It reminded me so much of how The Force Awakens literally leads right into The Last Jedi. I really dig that. It's very, that serialized feel. And it just, you felt for them. You felt like everything that their desires and their dreams felt so tangible that, like, I can remind myself of even myself currently, or even going back to like when I was in high school. I was like, yeah, I could see myself. Those are things that I would want. Like, it's such a relatable film, and I think these actors, they did such a good job just portraying it, because like we could see these characters sometimes bigger than life, but this film really just brought it down to earth and just really, it humanized everything, and it just made it felt nostalgic, or probably for people younger than you and I, it was like, these are things that people are like the high schoolers or even kids in college are actively thinking about. And so I felt it, and it just to see how quickly the world just turned, like just within a matter of seconds. Like, there wasn't even any question. It was like all of a sudden there was angry mobs everywhere. Obviously there were some cheerleaders. The teachers thought that was a fun scene. I actually thought of you during that. But that kind of shocked me a little bit. And I was like, it makes sense though, because you see things today, like how quickly news spreads and how quickly it is to see things in that light.
Yeah, and it makes us think all the way back, typically in your superhero movies, the superhero does not reveal his identity. Like, you think about Clark Kent, you think about Bruce Wayne. But when Iron Man came out, they threw that out the window with Tony Stark saying, "I am Iron Man," ending the movie, boom, and then picking right back up there. And I mean, typically most of these superheroes, their identity is known. Spider-Man was one of the exceptions. He was a kid. He was trying to conceal his identity. And typically the most people, it seems, that are in the background support our heroes, with the exception of by the time we get to Civil War with like the Sokovian Accords, where the people think it needs to be mandated. And these are things I wonder if they're going to come back that haven't been mentioned in a while. But I mean, how has life changed where him and MJ are just flying through the city? I mean, hilarious moments. You're laughing already at the beginning of the movie. He gets back home. Happy and May are still breaking up. It's continuing on. And, then we kind of cut to like a couple days that have gone by, and like the Stark tech is being analyzed, and they're being like looked at by what's the group from that was in Homecoming?
Oh, I forget the name, but it's
Wrecking Crew, or
yeah, it's like the
no.
cleanup crew or analyzing all the
Yeah.
debris and such.
So I would have loved to have seen a scene with Pepper Potts here, because I think she's still in charge of Stark Industry, right?
As far as we know, yeah.
So that would have been a cool opportunity to see her there. But so then while they're being interrogated, and like we're seeing just how they're being questioned, MJ and Ned and Aunt May. But the big one, of course, is whenever they get back to the apartment, and Peter has a lawyer now. JG, how glad were you to watch Netflix's Daredevil before you saw that big reveal?
I was so glad because I could cheer along with everyone else in that theater. Oh my gosh, that was probably the first big clap, the first big cheer, which is really cool. It's exciting, a show like it is beloved, but it's on Netflix, and it is not technically. I mean, I guess it is. It isn't. Who knows? It's canon or not canon. However you feel. Some people might not have seen it, but to hear that response, I was like, "Oh dang, this is big. This is exciting." And to have seen it, yes, so good.
Oh yeah. I mean, I wish they would have kept a tighter lid on it, because I feel like we've known about this as a rumor for at least a year now.
Yeah.
And so whenever he popped up, even though I was super excited, my buddy who I was sitting next to had no idea, because he like really avoided trailers and everything. Like,
wow.
There was so much of the movie he had no idea on. It was really cool to see his reaction. And I wish that, even though I love podcasting about it, if we could be less connected to all things Marvel, just to go into some of these movies and shows without having any idea would be even cooler. But man, I had heard that he had actually filmed a couple of scenes, but this was the one that made it into the movie. And it was just one little scene, but enough to kind of set up that, hey, good chance we'll probably see him again soon, maybe even as soon as She-Hulk later next year.
I'm a good lawyer.
He is a good lawyer, the way he caught that brick. And that's enough. Again, it's just a little tease. I didn't need him to suit up as Daredevil, but you got Matt Murdock now. You got a great actor who portrayed him for 3 seasons and a crossover on Netflix.
Yep.
And I'm so glad that he and Vincent D'Onofrio are back, and can't wait for more upcoming returns as well. So basically the characters, Ned, MJ, and Peter, kept getting rejected from college after college after college. And he realizes like their whole hopes of going to a college together are, even though they're all 3 very smart, very talented students, it's basically their reputation about being Spider-Man and being too close to Spider-Man is preventing them from having any type of future of any relevance. And so what we saw happen is he basically realizes, hey, maybe I could have a buddy named Doctor Strange that I could see if he could turn back time with that time stone that, of course, he doesn't have anymore. So JG, we now are kind of stepping into the Sanctum Sanctorum. We're seeing it looks a little different. It's got a lot of snow through it. We see Wong has some helpers cleaning it up. What do you think about this next scene of the movie?
So this scene actually stood out to me a lot, because the scene, we actually saw a good bit of this in the trailer. However, we didn't see it in the trailer because the trailer like put fake stuff in it, which is not a surprise. Marvel does this. Marvel puts fake things in there. So I was shocked, because that actually stood out to me in the theater. I was like, oh, this is different. This is not what I expected. This is not what they've shown us. I think one of the big takeaways, besides the fact that Wong doesn't say don't do this, is the fact that Wong is he's the supreme. He is number 1, not Strange, because of the absence. We didn't know that. That could actually maybe add a little clarity to why he was in that. Specifically, Wong was there for the in the post-credit scene of Shang-Chi. I think that was an interesting take. That makes me concerned for Wong for Multiverse of Madness, but we're not there yet. Specifically for this, I was very shocked by that development.
I was too. And, remember we mentioned before that originally Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was supposed to come out first. And some of the ways that the trailers were edited, it made it seem like we're having a darker, different version of Strange. And so I wonder if that maybe was the initial plan, but they had to revert back to the original Doctor Strange before we get another variant of him in the movie side. So yeah, for all intents and purposes, this is the Doctor Strange that we've come to know since 2016 or 17, whatever. And yeah, I mean, he's no longer so Wong's the Sorcerer Supreme now, but Wong, it seems, is spread pretty thin. He's going from place to place, never in one spot for too long. And he did not in the film warn, like you said, Doctor Strange about the spell. So that changes things a little bit.
He just said he doesn't want, and he doesn't want to be involved and clean up your mess, basically.
And so we'll have to see I'm hoping that Doctor Strange 2 will kind of pick up here pretty shortly after this film, with Doctor Strange having to deal with the side effects and the consequences of his actions with the spell. So Doctor Strange and Peter head down into the basement to finish up Act 1, and Doctor Strange is hard at work on this spell, and Peter kept doing what a normal teenager would do and thinking of things after the fact, which caused a lot of variations and changes until it was even too much for Stephen Strange to control.
Yes.
And it finally kind of ends up in this like little box to contain the spell. That was a cool scene. I mean, it felt a little bit like the end of Loki, where we saw kind of like something else out there, but only for brief seconds, right?
Yeah. Did you see the detail where, so he verbally changes the spell 5 times, and so it actually, there was some detail about it that has like 5, either, I don't remember, there's something to do with the number 5, but actually the actual like effect of the spell, like the orb or something, actually has like something to do with the number 6, and people are saying that it's Strange himself added himself not to be forgotten. So I thought that was an interesting, if that is the case, that is an interesting small detail. I don't remember now because my brain is failing me, but there was something to do. Oh, now it's escaping my mind. But that scene, I think that scene has a lot of details, more than people might realize. So when you're watching it, just pay attention. It's really cool stuff that they really put a lot of detail in.
Yeah, I'll have to go back, and that's something I'll pay attention to next time I watch it. So that kind of wraps up the first act. Is there anything else major from the first third of the movie you want to talk about?
No, I do think, I remember after the fact hearing some critics say that the first act was a little slow, maybe a little sloppy at points. I didn't see that personally. I think it kind of flowed pretty well. Maybe it's because I'm just so hyped and I'm so into it, and I just had spent so long investing into the Spider-Man. But I thought that, it definitely was slower, but I felt that it was still a good pace and that it flowed pretty well.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't know the exact timing of how much time each act spent, but I feel like by that point, you kind of knew from the trailer with the big idea with the spell, you were ready to kind of jump right back into it and continue moving on. And so I really feel like this second act is going to kind of pick up with Doc Ock on the bridge all the way up probably until Aunt May's death, right?
Probably, yeah. Because that's right before, I would say Aunt May's death at the end of
that's where I would kind of cut it at that moment.
Yeah.
All right, so Peter's on the bridge. He's basically trying to go out, and he's trying to get the MIT recruiter to kind of reconsider. And by saving her life, I mean, we knew these villains were coming back, but seeing Doc Ock and Green Goblin as the first 2 villains, because they were the first 2 villains we got all the way back in the early 2000s, were you super excited to see them more than just the one clip we saw from the trailer?
It was so good. And I love how like Peter Parker and how Spider-Man that is. The fact that, first him going out of his way to go find the recruiter there, that was so Peter Parker. And then whenever he goes out of his way to then save her, is so Spider-Man. And I love that so much, despite everything else that's going on. Finally getting to see the whole interaction and seeing that it actually is our Tom Holland. There has been so many theories and so many rumors, like I said, actually Tobey Maguire. Like, so seeing that full scene play out, seeing then how he has the Stark tech on it as the nanobots kind of come off, but then he's able to still control it. Super. Once these villains started to get introduced, it actually added a lot of comedy, which I think is so interesting because they're villains. They're the bad guys. They're the people that we're rooting against. However, they actually started to bring a lot more joy into this film, because at first it is starting out so bleak. Like, Peter's world is turned upside down. They're not getting into college, and he's trying to create the spell, and it goes wrong. But then these villains come, and oh my goodness, this audience, we were laughing.
Yeah, I mean, the villains just add so much more depth because, besides Eternals, you don't usually get this many characters to focus on. And even though it is Tom Holland, Peter Parker's movie, you had so many supporting characters both on his side and against him that you were just trying to follow everyone's story and try to like, you want to just see as much as you can about these characters. I loved whenever Doc Ock confronted Peter underneath the bridge and he realized he's like, you're not Peter Parker, but he is. I mean, I wonder what this movie would be like to someone that had never seen any other Spider-Man movie before. I'd be very curious because you don't need to, but man, it does help if you've seen the movies and you know them pretty well, because it's a sequel to those movies. It's a sequel to where we last saw these characters. And if you didn't know who Doc Ock was or Green Goblin or Electro, it would you wouldn't have the same, obviously you wouldn't have the same reaction, but it would change things too from what the whole point of this movie's all about. And I loved whenever Peter kind of took control of Doc Ock's arms. And like you said, it had so much humor where he was the one manipulating and controlling the arms and having him like locked down for most of the movie for that first part. So basically Doc Ock and Peter are up there. They just saved the recruiter, and who shows up with his manacle laugh. And really the only scene, correct me if I'm wrong, where we see Green Goblin in his original green suit from the movie, right? Because then it gets destroyed.
And it gets destroyed, yeah.
So I'm glad we at least got one scene with that to kind of pick up where we left off with Green Goblin right before he died. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're back in the Sanctum Sanctorum basement in this pretty awesome jail that Doctor Strange happened to have ready for at least 5 prisoners. And Lizard's already there, right?
Lizard's already there, yep.
So we've got Doctor Strange brought Lizard in, and Peter kind of just brought in, with Doctor Strange's help, Doc Ock. Those are the only two that are there at first, right?
Yes.
Okay. So MJ, Ned, and Peter have to Scooby-Doo this crap.
Oh man, that line, I have to admit, like, that line is just delivered so well, and just it really is a Scooby-Doo movie if you really think about it. Like, it has so many little nods, in my opinion. But yeah.
So basically, like, we see these characters that are now, MJ and Ned kind of stay for the time being in the basement to watch over. And this is the point where Peter, now correct me if I'm wrong, he's out with his black suit, which is just his suit inside out, right?
Yeah, because he got paint thrown on him as a result of all the criticism.
It looks pretty cool, the black and gold on there.
Oh yeah, it's actually in this. They added it to the Spider-Man game, and it is clean.
Yeah, it's a cool costume. I mean, so now he's looking out for kind of reports, or however he found out that there were other villains out there. So he ends up finding Sandman and Electro together, right?
Yeah.
Now, I did not pick up on this. I've got to give credit to my cousin who was texting me some plot holes. And this one, I mean, the whole spell is people are here who know that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Now, in Amazing Spider-Man 2, there's never a moment where Electro finds out who Spider-Man is. And even at the end of this movie, whenever he sees Andrew Garfield, he thought, oh, I thought you were black. Like, so I was hoping you were black. So help me find an answer to this, because I couldn't give him one really well. How does Electro, he's the only villain that doesn't know Spider-Man's identity. I mean, could we take that maybe did Harry Osborn tell Electro while they're planning their revenge? But I wish that would have been included.
I think the only thing then is if you have to justify it, then it happened off screen.
Yeah, because here's the thing. The movie's so good, I'm not going to let a little plot hole like that ruin it for me, because, man, I'm glad Electro was there, because
Jamie Foxx is back. Like, that is big in itself.
His portrayal, correct me, like, wouldn't you say his portrayal is so much stronger here than it was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Oh, a million.
Like, his version of Max here, like, I'm glad it's the same Max and not a variant or a different one, but just like the way he portrays wanting power, wanting respect, and holding on to that, it was really cool. And, Sandman, I wouldn't even call a villain for most of the movie, right? I mean, he just wants to get home to his daughter.
Yeah.
He wants to, like, where we last saw him, he kind of blew away, and we don't know did he die or not, but he wants to get to his daughter, and he kind of wants the other members, the villains, to cooperate so that they can get home, because that's the whole point. Peter's the good guy trying to help these villains out.
He's definitely an antagonist. I wouldn't say he's a villain. I think he ends up joining the villains because, like, he just wants to get back, and that's the way to get back.
Mm-hmm. So while they bring those two in, Aunt May has found someone that's appearing almost homeless, Norman Osborn. And I mean, we've only seen this once, you and I both, but is Norman Osborn still under Green Goblin's powers, possession at this point, and just playing May? Or was that, Norman Osborn in control at that point? What do you think?
I think because of the prior scene where he breaks the helmet and he leaves the suit behind. I think this is genuinely him trying to look for help and trying to genuinely like move forward. But as he is walking away, it literally has like that haunting voice is like, I will be with you, whatever it says. But it's basically, I'm not leaving you. And so while I think he is trying to leave it as much as possible, it reminds me of, wasn't it Spider-Man 2 where Toby leaves it behind? And then also reminds me of like Kylo Ren, him breaking his mask. And just like, it's such an iconic image that has been done a lot, but it's done so well. I do think that this is genuinely him and him trying to find help, not necessarily trapping, but I think as it progresses, it gets to the point where he's just consumed by that inner demon.
Yeah, I definitely get also a vibe of like Gollum and Smeagol from Lord of the
Ooh.
Rings, where Smeagol's the one that's trying to do the right thing and stay in control, but Gollum is just always there and taking over. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm hoping, if Norman is there trying to get help, and of course, May is someone who has always taught Peter to always offer help, always give back.
Yep.
I mean, it leads to her downfall, sadly.
It does.
But it, like we said, even though that's awful, it's part of our Peter Parker's journey to get to the real Spider-Man he needs to be. Like
Yeah.
I hate to say it, he's been kind of a fun teenager up until this point, but when he leaves this movie, he's going to be a different version of Spider-Man, and he's going to be, I think, one of the best versions of Spider-Man we've seen yet. So May and, Peter, they end up, oh yeah. So basically now those 5 villains are all locked up, and that's the point where Strange is going to try to send them back, right?
Yep.
But Peter realizes if they go back, they're going to go right back to right before they died, and our Peter Parker wants to help them. So he steals the box, gets pushed out of his own body. I mean, there's so much with this fight scene that was so trippy, just like anything with Doctor Strange. I mean, how did you feel about these 2 former friends, still friends, fighting each other?
Yeah. It's interesting because there is that moment where he does get punched out and it kind of separates, but he's able to go back. And I think that's interesting. That I think has some potential for some interesting stories down the road, because most of the time, but you should, because I think Strange even in himself, he says you should not be able to do that, but he is able to. So that's very interesting. And the fight was just so well done. It was visually stunning. It just takes us back to Doctor Strange, and it's going to take us to where we're going to see that again in Doctor Strange 2. Visually, it looked awesome, and it was like these 2 people, they don't want to hurt each other, but they have different opinion. It reminds me of Civil War. Except I think Civil War was like literally gonna, like, one of them was going to kill the other if they didn't stop. But yeah, it was I would not say I was emotional by this, because I felt that it felt like 2 brothers who were fighting.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. They both had different goals, but they're not going to kill each other. They're trying to do what they think is the right thing to do on both sides. But it ends up with Doctor Strange kind of getting stuck in the mirror dimension for most of the movie until the very end. And while that's happening, then that's where Peter and MJ and Ned and Aunt May kind of devise a plan where Peter's like, I can help them. I can fix their problems. And he goes back up to that kind of cool apartment that Happy has. And basically, again, I kind of always forget that Peter is such a scientist.
Yeah.
That he's working he's probably 18 years old here. And he is working to fix them. And I was really glad to see Doc Ock get fixed first, because again, Doc Ock, even though he's a villain, he's under the control of his arms, really, like just like in Spider-Man 2. So Otto Octavius is a pretty awesome character. And I'm glad we got some scenes with Otto, almost teaming up with the Spider-Man throughout the movie. And that's really important too to his character. So I was glad to see that be the first one fixed. And just as Peter's getting ready to fix other villains, he starts to get that Peter tingle again.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts
Electro.
about the Doc Ock, and then also leading into the Peter tingle and the end of this second act here?
That scene was so well done because you had all the villains there together, except for Lizard, because the Lizard stayed in the vehicle in the van, and so it was such a well done scene. There were so many different interactions and moments, and it leads to where we do get Dr. Octavius. He's healed basically. He's fixed, and which is awesome. And he even like he kind of like snaps out of it. And you could instantly tell that he's almost like a different man. But then we get to Electro, and it's starting to be resolved, and it's counting down. And as any countdowns know, and we know some bad countdowns, it then leads to that moment where everything like slows down and it pauses, and you just know it's got to be Osborn. It's got to be Osborn. And sure enough, that's when crap hit the fan. And that from that moment on, that whole sequence and that scene from that moment until where we get to the end, where it results in Aunt May's death, that was an incredible sequence of events and an incredible scene. Visually, the way that the acting and the characters and all their dilemmas, just everything. It was just so well done.
Yeah, I mean, you felt so tense in that moment. Like that was a solid, I'm guessing here, maybe 8 to 10 minutes where
Yeah.
you are not smiling, you're not laughing, you're not cheering. You are on the edge of your seat thinking something is going to happen and someone is probably not going to make it out of this scene. So as Aunt May is running for her life, as Peter's trying to stop, and he's then fighting Green Goblin and basically punching him in the face, and Green Goblin is just laughing, just like the Joker of Marvel right now.
It's violent.
It was violent. It was bloody. And Happy shows up, and I'm thinking, oh no, which one's going to get it? It's like you're just so nervous about who's not making it out of the scene. And then by the time we get to the end of the scene, when, you know, Green Goblin throws the bomb and it goes off, and yet May is still up and standing, and she's moving a little bit slower, but she's still, I'm thinking, is she actually going to walk out of this? Because usually, I hate to say it in these kind of movies, when someone's dying, like they usually don't get back up, and they don't usually have maybe again, I'm all way off on timing possibly, but a 3 or 4 minute death scene. Like that's unheard of. Like, look at how quickly Uncle Ben died in the last two, you know,
Yeah.
But this was the Uncle Ben moment. This was, instead of just having a 20 minutes to get to Peter to where he knows great power comes great responsibility, this took 3 movies plus his adventures in space. Like, this Peter Parker got the chance to breathe and develop into Spider-Man in a way that the other two just had to do it in 20 or 30 minutes. And I really loved it. Like, I wasn't expecting that to happen. And I mean, how powerful to see Aunt May die, a character who has just been, you go back and watch Homecoming and Far From Home, and she's just so fun and dorky and loving. And she's just such a good mother figure to Peter Parker, that when you see her die in his arms and he's telling her it's going to be okay, and he's still asking for her. I mean, it took me right back to seeing Simba watching Mufasa die. Like, how awful. I mean, did you get emotional? Obviously, that's a dumb question, but
yeah. I was a wreck. I was sobbing. I'm emotional. I get invested to these stories and characters. So I cry. No hesitation. And it's such a hard scene too, because like you see her and you're like, she's gonna make it out. And then you start to notice like her body language change. And why I do think, like, because I know some people are like, there's no way, this doesn't make any sense. Like, more than likely, y'all, she's in shock. Like, she probably doesn't realize it fully. Maybe she does, and that's why she says what she says and everything. But like, I say that I think a lot of what's happening right now is also playing into the fact that she is like in a shock, medical shock. And so I think that's what's also keeping her going a little bit, plus add adrenaline and all that stuff. And she gets to say the line, and it's slightly different from what we've seen on film. However, and I don't remember exactly what it is word for word, it is the original comic adaptation I saw, that it is the original wording that they use. So I thought that was a nice touch. And kind of like to say, like how you said it's taken 3 films, I saw few people make the statement saying like these 3 films are kind of like his origin film, you know, kind of like how Toby had his like Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2. Well, Tom's Spider-Man 1 is 1 through 3. It's the Homecoming. And so I thought that was an interesting way to look at it. When you look at all 3 together, like, yeah, it really does tell one whole story, and it is it is his interest story, and it ends with her death, and it's tragic. I kind of felt like this was coming. It was going to be either her or Happy, but seeing that Happy might still have more of a future down the road with all of his connections, it does make sense for him and for what is to come. It had to be Aunt May.
And like we said earlier, he's only 18 years old. So we don't know in this storyline. Maybe we'll get it in his freshman year TV show coming up soon. But we don't know what happened to his parents. We know they're not around. We have never heard of an Uncle Ben, and like he didn't even seem to recognize Uncle Ben's name in the next part of the movie. So Aunt May seems to be like a single aunt that's raising him. He already lost his, father figure, Tony, who really went back in time and risked everything to save, really because of Peter when he saw that picture there. So he's lost pretty much his, mother and father, his, adoptive mother and father in this series. And that's a lot to take for anyone, but especially an 18-year-old who's just becoming an adult. So that's pretty tragic there.
I want to bring up real quick, just so I don't forget. We had talked about, I think it was last week, we talked about Marissa Tomei, it was either last week or the week before. We had talked about how it ended. I wonder if there was at one point, maybe towards maybe a year or so ago, more than a year or so ago, before this movie was in development, that Aunt May had a longer future. And I really wonder what that would have been. However, I do think that this was the best path for her. But I think based off of that statement, I think there was a scenario where she survives this film.
Yeah, I also read it somewhere, and I have to find the source, where I think they discussed with her the possibility of having Aunt May have a girlfriend, potentially, even, and
I
kind of
that.
adding more, inclusiveness to Aunt May's character. But again, I think when she first signed on for the role, I'm sure they had lots of ideas, but they didn't realize just how much multiverse craziness was going to happen. So, yeah, I mean, we could definitely see her again I'm expecting to see her in the freshman year, as an animated character.
Yeah.
But I definitely think as a variant, she's someone that could pop up down the line as well. So I don't think necessarily this is the last we'll see of her, but maybe it should be for a while just to let Peter's story continue on. I mean, that was just such an intense, 10 minutes of the movie that, the Peter tingle all the way till her death. And then you see him up on top of the roof in tears with J. Jonah Jameson, just adding salt to the wound. And, you just get such a dark, this would have been if this was a TV show, this would have been the end of the episode. And it really does kind of fade to black for a second. And instead of showing Peter dealing with all of it at first, we kind of segue pretty quickly into the third act, and we see Ned and MJ who are hiding out at Ned's house. And I couldn't think of a better way and a more uplifting and happy way to switch gears, because you just go from being emotionally drained to emotionally excited in a completely different way with Ned bringing in the two other Spider-Man. I just can't get over, and I want to watch this scene over and over again, because just the joy you feel of, again, 20 years in the making. Talk to me, were you excited that it was Andrews that came in first, or what were your thoughts whenever you start to see someone walking towards the room there, the portal?
Yeah, I want to say I think it's really interesting. Obviously, this is not the big takeaway from this scene, but I think it's interesting. So when they first go into the Sanctum Sanctorum, Ned's talking to Strange about I think my family has a little bit of magic in her. My family was talking about magic and stuff, and they're all laughing because he's probably just crazy. But then without any, well, I wouldn't say with any, but with he's able to at least open portals. That's not exactly what he was trying to do, but he's able to do it, and Strange could not do that right away himself. So I just bookmarked that because I think we could talk more about that later. But obviously, Spider-Man. Oh my goodness, this place. Oh my gosh, that was the loudest. Well, there's probably one other scene, but this was one of the loudest scenes, is when these two come through. I love that it's Andrew first. I think that just makes a lot of sense. He's the most recent. He's probably more in some people's eyes. And while, I think you kind of leave that more aged, seasoned one last, I think that timing was perfect. I think the comedy and delivery, the entry was just, for Toby, it wasn't glitz and glam. He just walked through. They could have made it super cheesy, super fan servicey. Would we probably have liked it? More than likely. I think this was the best way. He literally just walks through the portal, street clothes, and is like, hi.
Yeah, I'm so glad, like you said, I mean, with Andrew not getting his third movie and allowing here, Andrew stayed in costume, I think, the whole time. He just put a white lab coat on at one point.
Yeah.
Whereas Peter, no, excuse me, Tobey Maguire, he didn't really, I mean, he had the costume underneath, but you didn't see it really till the final battle. And so that really, again, lets you really focus on give Andrew the chance to shine because he's such a good Spider-Man and a good Peter Parker. And so is Toby, don't get me wrong. Like, but the fact that you differentiated that way instead of having them both pop in with their costumes already on, it really allowed Tobey Maguire to be more of the Peter Parker and Andrew Garfield more of the Spider-Man. Because I think they're both kind of known for, I hate to say it, that version of the character in a way. And oh, the humor, this fact that that scene went on and didn't cut to anywhere else was perfect. And I mean, so if the spell really said like anyone that knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man, are we to believe then that like MJ, Kristen Dunst, came into the MCU, but we didn't see her, right?
So I think here's the thing is that the way that, because this has been talked about a lot on the internet, and the way that I've answered this is that they say that like some people, not everyone, because we even see like at the end when it like all heck is breaking loose and we actually start to see figures. I think not everyone made it through. Maybe some people did and we just didn't see it. But I think who we saw is like pretty much who was here. And that's who made it through. Not everyone made it through. So even though there are thousands of variants of people who know Peter Parker and know Spider-Man, they didn't all make it through. Because if they all made it through, then we're going to need a bunch of variant Doctor Stranges to fix this.
Yeah, because we could have had other variants of Spider-Man pop up too. And we just got these two other variants.
Yeah.
Okay. So the fact then that, you know, MJ and Ned, you know, so they saw on the TV that there was an explosion there and they know every version of Peter Parker has a place that they go to. And I will admit, like, I wish they would have shown Peter at this place more than just in this movie. Like if it would have been in the first two movies, just to build it up to this a little bit, but it was okay. At least he spent some time there at the beginning of the first act with MJ. But when Toby and Andrew and Ned and MJ show up on the roof of that school and just like how those two comfort him and like say, you know, Tom Holland puts the pieces of the puzzle together, like the multiverse is real. And like he tells his version of Aunt May and they tell their version of Uncle Ben and they kind of quickly fill you in on their background in case you didn't know their story. Like, oh, that exposition was perfect.
It was so good. I visually remember because I was sitting with one of my close friends. Like we were like literally like crying in each other's arms. Like it was like so emotional. Like that was the most emotional of the scene of the whole movie. It is my favorite scene of the movie. Just seeing these three and like, in my opinion, Andrew stole that scene. Andrew is just this whole movie. He just shines and he really like. I know a lot of people. Tom Holland. Because he's so fresh and he's like our main Spider-Man right now, is a lot of people's favorites. Andrew, for me, like competes heavily to be my favorite, and because of this film, and on top of his other films, but specifically this film, like Andrew just is again in that scene and just everything that happened. It's just my heart was breaking and I felt the pain of like 20 years of these characters and just all in this, it all comes together in this one scene. Plus, you then also add in his like two closest friends, his girlfriend and his best friend are there too. Like it is insane the amount of emotion that is portrayed in that moment.
Well, and you think about it, you know, Tobey Maguire, he kind of got closure. If his trilogy was the last we ever saw of him, great. Andrew was kind of pulled the rug underneath him because, you know, I think he was signed on to more films, at least a third movie. There was rumors he was going to be in a Sinister Six version with Sonyverse. Like, I feel like he was planning on playing this character for at least a couple more years. And then boom, they announced he's going to be in Civil War and recast. And so I think that really hit him. And I think Andrew realized, you know what, if this is the last chance, which I don't think it will be, if this is the last chance I get to play this character, I'm giving it 100%. And like, it showed acting chops that I wasn't expecting. I was so glad to see like his emotions whenever he gets teary-eyed over Gwen and whenever it's just like, it's so well performed because again, he brought so much passion into this project and he wasn't just cashing in to get a paycheck. And I don't think Tobey Maguire was either, but there was definitely more emotion and more excitement you could feel from Andrew Garfield returning. Yeah. So they go to the high school because their goal is the three of them are going to work together, like science bro this up so that way they can get the cures for the other 4 villains and get them ready for this final confrontation. Like, how cool was it seeing, first of all, the humor there between all 5 of these characters, the 3 Spider-Man and Ned and MJ, and just seeing them science it up together. And even though they have different science abilities, but they're working for a common goal. Wasn't that perfect?
It was so good. We finally, we literally got hit with that brick wall of Aunt May dying. We got that joy then of seeing these other Spider-Men finally, and then we got back down and we're all feeling so sad. And now to bring it back up, that's when we needed that comedy the most. And it felt so good and natural. It answered questions. They literally did the meme point when they're like, "Hey Peter," and they're like, "Me?" And then they like point to each other with Peter. And then literally get to the point where they're talking about the natural versus the artificial webs. There were so many different scenes. And then even Ned, whenever they're talking about Ned being the best friend, is he going to turn on Peter? There were just so many good little moments. Like, this was the moment where like we were like, if anything was the most fan servicey, it was done right. But the most fan servicey was this scene here. It was like they were just checking box after box after box of all these things that, we had wanted to see. And then just to see them working together to be that Peter Parker, to save the day, that even though Strange was like, no, we have to send them back. All these Peters had the same vision that they were going to, save these villains.
And yeah, do you think that the Ned line that's brought up here and then later in the movie, is that a setup for him going Hobgoblin, or is that just their way of acknowledging it? But I just have a hard time seeing awesome, fun, loving Ned go dark. But I mean, now that he doesn't know who Peter is, he could, right?
Hey, we all know a little boy on a desert planet who loved to pod race. Like nothing is out of the realm of possibility.
Little Annie.
Ned's betraying him at some point. It won't be probably till the 3rd film at the earliest. It's happening.
But would it really be a betrayal wouldn't that be devastating too if our Spider-Man's being chased down and when he takes off the mask, he sees Ned, but Ned doesn't recognize the man in front of him? I don't know. Jeez.
Well, I would imagine they would have to know each other. I mean, the memories would have to come back before. To have the most impact, it would have to, unless there's a way if we really thought it out, there probably could be a way to do it before. But I think possibly to have the most impact, yeah.
Maybe I know we're kind of don't want to run too late today, and with our awards show next week, but maybe some point in January we could do a speculation of what we want to see in the next film or trilogy. Okay. So anything else at the high school before we move on to the Statue of Liberty?
No, it all leads to this final battle. And I think also one other thing is really powerful is that literally these villains directly Osborn is literally the murderer of Aunt May. Yet at the same point, they are doing their best to help these villains so they don't die. That is Peter Parker. That is insane. Obviously, you and I know, we'll talk about it. Our MCU, Tom, his Peter, he has a lot of emotion and he definitely does go down a dark path. But in this moment, I love seeing them trying to do the right thing to help these villains.
And like you said, that both Toby and Andrew have gone down dark paths before, and they don't want to see a different version of themselves go through that again. So, if they weren't there, just imagine how dark it could have gotten for Tom Holland's Peter Parker. So he's basically now on Daily Bugle's, InfoWars type show saying, "Come out to the Statue of Liberty. Here's where I'm at." And of course, they're setting up their plan there. And it was some of my favorite moments is hearing their different versions of their conversations, because if you met a different version of yourself, you'd ask similar questions. And they're talking about the craziest villains. We hear a reference to Rhino, we hear a reference to Venom, which is going to come into play later on. We hear just so many moments. And basically, were you cracking up at their interactions? Because it was
that was so good. Right before we got into the severity of this fight and what was going to go down, I love that moment. And I think one of the biggest takeaway from that is that line where it is because he's talking about Toby's talking about, I fought an alien, I fought the Venom, the black suit, and then I went to space and I bought a purple alien, and Andrew's like, I didn't fight an alien yet. You will, Andrew. Just give it a couple years. You'll fight an alien. I love that. That is 100% set up. Well, we can talk about that later too. But I love that because instantly, I looked at my friend. I was like, they're setting him up with Venom, Venom.
Is that what you're? Because here's the thing. Right before when Venom 2 came out, Do you remember they were mentioning Venom will? Did they say Venom will fight Spider-Man? Did they say Venom will fight Tom Holland or meet Tom Holland? Like, what was the wording? And even if it was a red
Ooh.
herring, like if they said Tom Holland, that's fine. But I mean, Andrew Garfield's universe fits so well into Venom Morbius.
Yeah.
Like it's destined, and that would be a perfect either Venom 3 or Spider-Man 3, whatever. Oh man, come on, make it happen. So, and what I liked then was, after a little bit of banter and the villains show up, they each kind of do their own thing and realize pretty quickly, this is not going to work unless we're a team. So they come back and regroup. And that's when Peter's like using the fact that, again, each of them brings something different to the table. He's like, I'm an Avenger. And they're like, that's great. What is it? Is it a band? And they're like, but because Peter's been in a team before on these huge battles, he realizes we can't just go out and do our own thing if we're not collaborating and working together. And it led to I don't want to spoil it for next week. One of my favorite shots ever is those three swinging together and landing superhero pose that Yelena would hate.
Yeah.
They land on the Statue
The money
of Liberty.
shot.
The money shot that, man, I'm so glad was not spoiled before the movie amongst anything else that was spoiled. Oh, they're working together as a team. They are the same person, different versions, but oh, how cool was that?
It's so cool to see them like failing epically. They're getting their butts whooped, and then all of a sudden they like he does, and that's when we get another point. They do it twice, the whole pointing meme, and because he does Peter 1, Peter 2, Peter 3, and they're like they point at each other again, and that is when they come together, and that's when things are getting done. They start to fix all the villains and everything, and then it leads to the final confrontation with Goblin.
And before we get there, it's not a big complaint, but in my head, I think if I was writing the script, I probably would have said, all right, just based on age, Toby, you're Spider 1, Andrew's 2, and Tom 3, because then that's the order we knew them in, because like that's what I would number them just to make it easier to remember, like the order of appearance almost.
Who was 2 and 3 out of the other two?
I think Toby was 2.
Okay.
And I think,
Andrew would be 3. I think it works because I think being the fact that Tom is the primary of the movie and he's the primary of our focus, I think it makes sense. That's why he's number 1.
But they could have done a cool joke like, age before beauty, and then because like Toby's back was just a funny, like he's an older version of.
Oh yeah.
All right, so they've now at this point, like you said, they've kind of captured and healed the other villains
with ease. Once they do it together, like it was a quick sequence.
And I was glad that they brought back the original actors for Lizard and for Sandman, because most of the movie, I don't know how much of that was them versus CGI versus
reshots.
But anyhow, getting them to the actors to have at least one little cameo was a nice touch, and I'm glad they each got to come back for at least something. But yeah, the big fight there at the bottom with Tom Holland versus Green Goblin, and if Toby wouldn't have stepped in, I mean, would Tom have gone all the way and killed him? What do you think?
Yeah, without question.
And so when Toby steps in the middle there and holds it, it almost reminded. Wait, what was he hitting him with? He was hitting him with
the glider. I thought, wasn't it the glider?
Yeah, the glider. And it almost reminded me of a scene from maybe it was Civil War when they're holding the shield against it, right, or something like that.
Yeah, and Iron Man and Captain America, whenever they're fighting at the end, whenever he goes to almost murder him. Yeah.
And then, of course, the moment that made me gasp was Green Goblin using his spear on his wrist to basically stab Toby, which I thought he was dead right there and then. Like, I really thought he was going to get an emotional farewell and he would have died like Logan style. But nope, he survived, thankfully. But by him stepping in, that's what kept Tom Holland from going all the way to the dark side, right?
Yeah, I was very concerned for a moment that Tom was going to not accidentally, I guess accidentally, kill Toby in that moment. Like I was very concerned, because then that would have been even like darker path, and like I don't even know like how the fans would respond to that. Like that would be, oh boy, that'd be quite divisive. I'm glad it didn't. I think this fits with the outcome that we get, fits the story better. Because at this point, also, while this is happening, we also, Strange finally makes his way back and is starting to, try to fix things on his side of things. And so, but to see that, that definitely was a big gasp. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was like, oh my gosh, is he dead? Like, please no, not after all of this. I'm glad that he didn't die. I don't think that this means, for me personally, I don't think Toby is getting a standalone film. I don't think it's out of the possibility for him to show up in the future in some other projects. I think that's very possible, being the fact he is alive. I just think that this definitely sends and completes Toby's story for me.
I would have said completed 100% if we would have seen him get home and see MJ.
Nah,
That's the only thing. And then I would have been like, I never need to see him again.
darn you,
feel like-
COVID.
Yeah, I do wonder if that was. Yeah, they said that was in the plans at one point, but that would be the only thing. I'd love to see him happily with MJ one last time. And I do feel like with how great this movie's doing, I mean, you could do a Spider-Verse film every 5-10 years, kind of like Avengers, and it would still be massive, just seeing how big this was. So Tom swings up to talk to Doctor Strange, who's trying to contain everything that's coming through at this point. And we start to see some, shadows. We saw the one that really stood out to me was the Rhino, and not like the Paul Giamatti Amazing Spider-Man Rhino, but it was like from the comics, the actual like Rhino human infused combo. What other ones did you see?
There was definitely I think I saw Vulture. There was another. I think I saw Black Cat as well. There was a few. Being the fact that I've only seen it once and I haven't really looked on the internet. I know a few other people have like there's some good lists going around. That's gonna be like that scene where like in Rise of Skywalker where we have every ship in the galaxy. Like that's gonna be the scene where people freeze frame and start looking for everything.
Yeah, I agree there. So, but Peter realizes how does he even come to the realization where Doctor Strange says, we can reverse this if everyone forgets who Peter Parker is, right? I'm trying to think how that came about.
It's because like he can't stop it. Like everything is coming through now. He's trying to stop it. Strange is trying to stop this, and it's just not working. And so that's when Tom has the idea. Well, if they're coming because they know me, well then just make everyone forget me.
Yeah, which is again very heroic, very selfless thing to do, because how isolating would it be like if you woke up tomorrow and your family, your friends,
No one.
your work, no one knows who you are. You have to start from scratch. Like you don't have a social security number, you don't have money, you don't have anything. Like how do you even survive like that? I don't even know. But like it was such a heroic moment for him, and he gets to say one last goodbye to Ned and MJ and the other two Spider-Man, and that was heartbreaking too, because like I'm sitting next to my wife thinking this would be the hardest thing ever if I had to say goodbye to you and you would not even know who I was.
It was a train wreck like that scene, and obviously the rooftop scene, but that scene also, I was just like, I'm a hopeless romantic and you're gonna break my heart. I think that this was such a rich way to end the movie though, with this decision. It is so Peter Parker. It is so Spider-Man. Like it screams, and I think what it really does is that when this movie was being written and being made, they didn't know the future, what held, like what. We don't even know yet what it really fully held. I mean, they do. They have to know what's going on. But they didn't know back then when they were making this. So like they had to leave it very open-ended, because if Peter is to go back to and Tom and that Spider-Man's supposed to be like very strictly in the Sonyverse, well, they could do that. If it's going to be very much Marvel related in the MCU, they can do that. So it's very genius writing and very smart when it comes to the studios, because it gives them the doors wide open for them to do whatever they want.
Well, remember, my big theory was going into this that the end of the movie was him going to sacrifice himself but go to a different universe, like the Sonyverse. And even when he's talking to Doctor Strange, that's what I thought he was going to say and suggest. But that didn't happen. So clearly, by him staying in the MCU and the other two going back to their universes, I mean, that's a pretty clear indication that Sony and Marvel realized, hey, this is going to be a hit. We want to keep working together, because Sony and Amy Pascal could have easily said at the end of this movie, he's going over to the Sonyverse for a while. Yeah, you can have him back for Avengers 5, and we'll find a way to do that at that point for like a cameo or appearance. But he's going back to Sonyverse for the time being. And they didn't do that. They kept him in the same universe as all the other Disney Plus shows and Disney movies. So that gives me hope that, and again, I don't want to, we can do a whole episode talking about our theories, and we'll save those. But so, the movie really ends with a couple last scenes, and it kind of felt to me like, again, epilogue after epilogue, where he he shows up at the same diner where MJ works,
Ah,
and it seems like he's practicing. He's going to tell her who he is, but the thing that stops him is he sees that she's got a band-aid from where she was cut up during the battle. And I think just realizing, right, that if I bring her back into my life, even slowly, and I have to reintroduce myself, it's going to only lead to danger for her. And he loves her and he loves Ned so much, he doesn't want to put them in danger. Is that the takeaway you took from that scene?
yeah, and that they have a happy future right now. They both got accepted to MIT. You know, they're going to be moving forward, and they're safe at the moment. Another big takeaway for me is that they're 100. She's gonna at the very least she is, just for the sole reason is that she still has the necklace on her neck. That I
And
think.
she,
Go ahead.
yeah, she told him, she's like, don't tell me you love me now. I don't even know if that was the first time they told each other. I can't remember, but
Mhm.
if it was, that's even more powerful. She said, come and tell me and whenever I know who you are again. And so they don't end, you don't end like that. You do have to, even if it takes another trilogy to build back up to it,
Yep.
they will be end game couple right there at some point, whether he's with Gwen or whoever else first. I don't know. What about, oh, what was I going to say? Oh, do they remember working with Spider-Man and the events of the movie, but it's just blurry who's underneath the mask? Like, do they?
It has to. They have to have because they just don't know who Peter is. So they probably at the very least they know that they've worked with Spider-Man. They don't know who Nobody knows who Spider-Man is, and
Does she remember dating Spider-Man? Like, if she saw him, would she think that's my boyfriend? Or
I don't think so because she dated. Because I think it's the fact that she dated more like the Peter Parker, not necessarily Spider-Man.
okay, yeah,
Because if it was like Spider-Man, like strictly Spider-Man, then it'd be like, oh, but she knew Peter, so therefore, kind of, I think it wipes that slate clean from my perspective. It's a little gray, like the spell and this whole thing. It's not perfect, and I hope that they kind of don't dwell on it because I think the more you think about it, the more you find cracks in it, the more weird it gets. It is a storytelling device that they use that I think does work if you don't think about it too much.
yeah. I'd be curious how much it will be referenced, like whether we see another Avenger talk about Spider-Man, like because they would remember fighting with him, but they don't remember who Peter Parker is. So like they would remember him in the final battle, and oh, that'd be heartbreaking if Tony was still alive and couldn't remember him too.
The
But
big question is that I've seen is that I'm pretty sure whenever he's talked about it, it's that it's the people on Earth. Well, the Guardians aren't on Earth. Thor's not on Earth. Captain Marvel's not on Earth. Are they gonna not know? Does this include them? So I think that's gonna be interesting to know is that are they included in this or not?
yeah, the way the spell was worded, I'll have to look exactly at it. But yeah, that'd be interesting because remember, like maybe that's the way they bring him back in because when
Or Fury?
or Fury, because he's not on Earth, he would know him. What about when Captain Marvel said, "Hi, Peter"? Like, remember that's how. So like she would know. That'd be a way to bring him back in. I didn't think about it. That's a good loophole there too. But and then one of the last scenes, I'm trying to think of the order, is Peter's at Aunt May's gravesite and Happy's there. And was there any chance of you that was hoping Happy would remember him or not, or you just knew it wasn't going to happen?
I knew it wasn't gonna happen. For this spell to be 100% like fluid and for this problem to be resolved, everyone on Earth, depending on whatever this wording is and this technicality, everyone on Earth had to not know him, and that included Happy, which he has a connection to Spider-Man, but he doesn't know it's him. He doesn't know it's Peter.
Mm-hmm. What Aunt May? She wouldn't even remember him either
Nope.
if she was still alive. Jeez. That's so isolating. Like, and then like, he goes up to get the apartment, which again reminded me so much of Toby's apartment from Spider-Man 2 and 3. And it makes you really feel like, again, it took him 3 movies plus Civil War plus Avengers and Infinity War and Endgame to get to this point where he's the young college Spider-Man from the comics, from the video game, from Spider-Man 2. Like he's on the same playing field that Toby was really in Spider-Man 2. And he's starting off completely on his own. He doesn't have any support system. He's sewing his own costume, which looked amazing. Like bright blue and red. Like, I mean, it came like straight from the comics, straight from the animated show. Like it felt so awesome.
Yeah.
And it was only in the dark, and with the spotlights on it, looked so shiny and bright and such an awesome, as he's swinging over Madison Square Garden, like, oh, perfect final shot there too.
I love the significance of that because I didn't even think about it while I'm watching this. But the reason why he has that is because the Stark suit's not going to know him because nobody knows Peter. He has to start from fresh, and it gives us that more ideal like comic like Spider-Man. Like I know a lot of people. I'm not. This is not for me, but a lot of people have said, "Oh, that's just Iron Man Junior." Well, no, this is. If you had any doubts or any questions, you were saying that this is 100%. This is Spider-Man. He's no longer that. This is where he's going. I love the rent money. That was so good. Just a slight. It would have been really good if we got the same actor. I don't know if he's still alive or not, but just hearing that reference was just so that just a nice little end, and seeing the beautiful night shot of the suit, and that just shows us like the story is not over yet. And the saga of this character is only going to continue, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, let's definitely put our speculation of what comes next for Spider-Man in a January episode, because we could talk all night about it. But before we wrap up, let's talk. So first of all, they always do. First of all, they do great credits. Like the drawings of the three, especially the three Spider-Man, was awesome. And the mid-credit scene was something that I guess at the beginning of the movie, you know, I was thinking, oh, when's Venom going to pop up? Is he? We think he is. And of course, you get through the whole movie and he's not in it until the mid-credit scene. And he's at a bar. He's talking to the bartender, basically trying to learn about all the Avengers and MCU and everything. And it's comical. It is. It's like a little recap. But then in Venom's talking, we don't see Venom, right? We just hear him.
We just hear him.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, obviously it's happening at the same time as Doctor Strange's spell to forget Peter Parker, that Eddie and Venom just disappear. So he literally probably joined the MCU for a total of a minute and a half, 2 minutes between the two post-credit scenes.
Basically.
But he didn't take 100% of himself with him, because what's left on the counter?
We have a little bit of the symbiote. We have baby Venom.
Does that mean, and again, we're saving for speculation, but
we can talk about it here.
Yeah, we can. We think that Andrew Garfield has potential to fight Eddie Brock Venom or work with him, whatever that looks like, in Venom 3 or in Amazing Spider-Man 3, whatever that could be. But because a little piece of Venom is left behind in the MCU, I mean, is that saving up for one of the future Tom Holland films? Does that mean we could get him with his black suit and then eventually break away again, but maybe not do it in one film, but spread it out over a couple? Like, I know you've mentioned that theory before. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is leading us to a black suit trilogy or black suit storyline. I think this is gonna be very prevalent. I'm curious to see how they do this, where they go this. They have different paths. They can have it go directly to him. They could have it go towards someone else, kind of like how it went to like Eddie. I'm very curious to see. I'm also curious how they execute it in general. Like, is this going to be like, are we going to have Tom Hardy voice this symbiote? Is this going to be voiced by someone else? Or is this going to even have a voice in itself? I feel like it should. It's a symbiote. It's going to move. It's going to do something. I think the big ultimate thing is that they did this so they have options. And that's kind of like how I even feel about the ending of this movie. They obviously have it there. They're going to use it at some point. It's more of like when. And we're going to have to wait and see. I do think, I don't want to say it was disappointing, but like there was a lot of talk, and maybe it's us fans. We had talked a lot and hyped a lot about the whole fact that Eddie and Venom were in the MCU, and then they're just gone. I kind of was hoping that we'd get to see more of actually Eddie and Venom, specifically Tom Hardy, interact with Tom Holland. And that's not to say that doesn't happen. Like, who knows? Like, with what we've seen in this film, it very well could happen. But I think in the immediate future, I don't think that's on the table right now. And I kind of wish it was. And I don't want to say I'm disappointed, because I'm not necessarily disappointed. I don't know. I don't know the word for it. Maybe bummed. Maybe just a little bummed.
Yeah, because I mean, here's the thing. You can watch the Venom trilogy, which I know we're probably going to get a third one soon, and you could completely skip No Way Home, and you would see the post-credit scene at the end of Venom, Let There Be Carnage. But really, I'm sure, I don't even know if they're going to address it in Venom 3. I don't know. I mean, it was an odd decision. Why even include him? I mean, I know it was a big movie this year, so you can, like, you know, maybe get some. I don't know. I don't know why they included it.
It's just interesting of the many ways of them to introduce a symbiote and introduce the specific like Venom symbiote into the world of the MCU. It's so fascinating to me the choice that they made to literally rip the one from that other universe into this universe, to literally his sole purpose, in my opinion, is to literally leave a piece of him behind. From what we know, that's literally the only thing that's happened.
But yet at the same time, if we wanted to include more Venom, Tom Hardy, Eddie Brock in the movie itself, what do you have to cut? Because you really can't make it a 3-hour movie, I don't think. So you'd have to cut a couple other scenes, and I'd have a hard time cutting or editing down the movie any more than what it is. I don't know. I am curious, and again, I want to talk more about it in the future. Where is this going to go? Because there are a lot of potentials. I just sent you an article while we're recording, and I'll send it again in a sec here. But it's like all the possible ways that the story could go. So maybe we can use that as inspiration. Then we get to our last post-credit scene, which again, we mentioned, I think last week, is the first time since 2011's Captain America, the First Avenger, where it's not really a scene per se, but it's actually a teaser for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. And then it became available online about a week later. So have you watched a couple times? Like, what stands out to you about that scene, and does it fit appropriately enough after Doctor Strange has such a big role in this film?
Oh, 100%. And it gets me so excited. And I say this over and over and over and over. I cannot wait for horror. Now, obviously, this is not going to be a slasher. This isn't going to be like horror, but it's going to introduce a lot of horror motifs and themes that I'm so excited that my friends who normally don't watch it are now going to be subjected to watch it because it's Marvel, and I cannot wait. Overall, it looks fantastic. I'm really curious to see what they're going to end up with Wanda, because Wanda is going to be such a huge part of this. Is she a villain? Is she a hero? Is there multiple Wandas? There's going to be clearly multiple Stranges. I think there's multiple Wandas too. We saw a tease of America Chavez, another huge multiversal character. You know, we've heard that they've been reshooting lots of reshoots to add in lots of cameos. And I've been hearing that if people thought that No Way Home was bonkers and crazy, that people are saying like the audience reaction to Multiverse of Madness is going to be even crazier. And I can't even fathom that. And I think I sent you this. The in the trailer, I didn't notice it in the theater, but now watching it at home, I love that they show the different Marvel logos in the intros of all the different eras from Fox, Sony, everything. I was like, oh, we're going there.
Like, if you ever want to do a chance to bring in like the Hulu shows or the ABC shows or the Netflix shows, even for a 30-second cameo, this is your chance to do it, because you would have the same types of reactions to the Matt Murdock. Like, you might not know every little reaction, but bring in Nick Cage's, Ghost Rider, bring in Wesley Snipes' Blade. Like, this is the perfect chance. And, I shared something on Facebook the other day. Fandango put out their 10 most anticipated 2022 movies. And I'm going to read through them real quick for you. Number 1, Wakanda Forever. Number 2, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the Marvel ones. Number 4 is Thor, Love and Thunder. Doctor Strange is number 6. It's the lowest of the 3 Marvel movies. And I'm surprised because, again, spoiler alert, when we talk about it next week, as of right now, spoiler alert, Doctor Strange is in the lead right now. And maybe it's because it came off of the heels of that post-credit scene. And I'm wondering when this poll was taken, maybe even before Spider-Man or whatever. But it makes me curious because, like, I think Doctor Strange is the big one event film of the year next year. But it does make me excited to think that the general population who are going to go into next year, they're going to be hit like in May with this huge movie and then still have 2 other big movies. And it seems like they're more excited for Wakanda to see what happens with Black Panther sequel after Chadwick Boseman's passing. But that surprised me that was number 6 out of 10 for Doctor Strange.
It is interesting being the fact that there has been the hype is building now for that film. I just have to look back to like just how successful and such a cultural phenomenon Black Panther was. The fact that it's, I think, the only one that has a Best Picture nomination at this point. So I that film, I think it just did so many things right in so many ways. And I think that with the unfortunate passing of Chadwick, and I think that this film just does have this, even if maybe in the story of the MCU right now, maybe the stakes are maybe not super high, but I think outside and the importance this is to people, it has elevated to that number one status.
But also, that movie's had, it seems, with COVID, one of the biggest struggles to get made. Like, I know they're still in production. They still keep pushing things back. Like, I hate to say it, if any movie from next year is going to get pushed back, that seems like it could be one that gets pushed back. I wonder if the Marvels is far enough along they could swap them. Like, we've seen Marvel do that before, but I wouldn't be surprised if we only get, on the MCU side, Doctor Strange and Thor next year. And I'm optimistic it'll still happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it gets pushed back because of delays in production as well. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say because they're still filming. Like, they're going to be filming back in January. And now with all the surges, it definitely does concern me. I've told you this on recording and off recording. I just want this film to come out, and I want it to be the tribute and legacy that it needs to be for Chadwick, and I don't want anything else to get in the way of that. And it's so hard that we cover these films and we know a lot about this stuff more than probably the average person. And I would not be putting it lightly if I said that I'm not concerned about this film. It's my least look forward to them. Oh, don't get me wrong, I'm very looking forward to it. I think it's going to end up fine. But hearing what we've heard, and obviously we're not there, we're not on set, we don't know this. We're hearing it from leakers with reliable sources and quotations. Like, it does. I do have concerns, yet I am hopeful, and I know that under the leadership of Kevin Feige and all the other executive producers of Marvel, that they are not gonna put out a product that they would not stand behind.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll get more details, and I hope that I'm hoping early next year we'll start to get some more concrete details about like an order of when we're gonna see the shows. And I mean, there's so much coming out, like. And I'm sure there's so much in the pipeline that we haven't even heard any rumblings about because it's not even been teased yet because it's based on characters that we haven't even met yet. So, I'm just so excited. But I mean, I really enjoyed talking about Spider-Man with you.
Yes.
Because it's still going to go down, I think, as one of my favorite Spider-Man movies and one of my favorite MCU movies. And I can't wait to rewatch it again. I'm hoping to get out to the theater again if I can. And if worst case, I'm sure it'll be on Blu-ray and digital probably by February or March. But I'm really excited to watch it again and again and again and again. And I hope our audience loved it as much as we did. I'd love to hear from them too. But man, I'm excited for next week with you, 20th episode, and our Marvelcast. Like, I just really look forward to recording with you, and I'm hoping our audience keeps growing and enjoying hearing our thoughts and sharing theirs.
Definitely. And that does wrap it up here. This is our last episode of 2021, as crazy as that is. And it wraps up episode 19 of Marvelcast. We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of Marvel with us. We want fans to interact with this podcast, so we can't wait to hear your feedback and questions. You can email us at marvelcastpod@gmail.com. That is in the description of the podcast episode and also on the YouTube video. Please subscribe to 1138 Productions feed if you haven't, and leave a review wherever you listen, specifically Spotify, because Spotify now does reviews. So if you can, definitely do that, because that will really help get the podcast out to other people, and it really does make a difference, guys. And it's as simple as just hitting the 5 stars or whatever you feel that we are. It really does help. And so check us out on YouTube for a video version as well of the podcast. And from myself and Steve, have a marvelous week and a happy new year. And remember,
I could do this all day.